Today's date is December 26, 2024. This is Luciana Spracher representing the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. I am interviewing John Lutz for the Savannah Community Memory Project. We are conducting this interview at the Ships of the Sea Maritime Museum. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start by having you tell us your full name.
My name is John Lutz.
Okay. When and where were you born?
I was born in Red Bank, New Jersey at Fort Monmouth in June of 1960.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your background, about your family, and where you were raised.
I was raised a little bit all over until the 6th grade because my dad was in the service, and then in the 6th grade we had moved to his hometown. So I spent most of my youth in Troy, Ohio, a small town in southwest Ohio, north of Cincinnati. And that's where I ended up going to college 20 miles away, and then eventually moved to Cincinnati and then on to other places after getting married.
Okay, and how did you come to live in Savannah?
When I was in grad school, I interned one summer. This would have been the summer of 1988 for Michael Brown. He was the assistant city manager at the time, and I interned with him and had a great experience and went back and finished grad school, got a job with the city of San Antonio. And a couple of years later, I had done a project when I was in Savannah with Carlton West, who was the revenue director at the time, and a position came available to be the assistant director, and I applied and got the job.
Okay, so let's back up for a minute. What was your internship with Michael Brown?
It was, I was in a public policy, public administration graduate program. I worked on several different projects, one of which was working with Carlton on collections and operations within the revenue department.
Okay, so you come back, what year did you come back?
Came back in September of 1990.
1990 as assistant director for the revenue department. And where was the revenue department then?
It was on the first floor of City Hall at the intersection of Bay and Bull, right when you walked in, right by the fountain. And my office was just as you walked in, not to the office part or the business part, but there was an office behind that. And my office was a small office, and then Carlton's was the one next to it. So I had a nice window out to the river, actually, and to the Hyatt.
Okay, so your office was at the back, the north side of the building,
right,
by the staircase.
Yeah, the back wall of my office was the staircase, like right there. Yeah.
Okay. So talk a little bit about the layout of the revenue department. So where did the public come in?
So the public typically came in the front door of City Hall, right off Bay Street. If they could find parking and if they could get there. And then they came in, and you could go to the right, which I think was public information. There was something on that side, and then we were on the other side. So if you came in, we were on the left-hand side, and there was two entries. It was kind of enter and exit, but people kind of came in either way. And you walked into kind of a bay or a catchment area with booths and windows of people who wanted to pay water bills, property bills, and get information about their property taxes, business licensure, all those kinds of things. That was all handled. We were the city marshal's office as well, so all of that was handled out of that space. And it was often a little chaotic because there were so many people coming and going, and it was at Bay and Bull. There was no place to park. And people kind of came in, and it was always just a little bit of a crazy environment because it was, people were crowded in kind of a small space and trying to get what they needed and get out.
What did this space look like?
It was kind of long and narrow. It was heavily wooded, like the rest of City Hall. There was a long counter with kind of fencing, I don't know what to call it, caging. It was kind of if you see, old movies about banks or teller windows, or racetracks where, you go up and pay for tickets, but there was like little windows, and each of them handled a different thing. And so it was a little bit of kind of walking in and figuring out, well, which window do I need to go to? But it wasn't solid. It was like graded. I mean, it was kind of ornate, but it was still kind of a protection or a separation between the public and the staff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the public would be on one side
Yeah.
of that graded area, and then staff would be on the other side. Was there Were there gates or doors?
That is interesting. I am having a hard time remembering because the public did not come behind the counter.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very big thing. But I think there was, because everything, there were desks and clerical people. There was an inordinate amount of paper and big registers where you could literally look up someone's address and their property tax or their license, their business license. So there was lots of paper everywhere and just kind of stacked. I remember that. So there were all these kind of handmade or made to fit shelving and everything. I'm sure much of which was not original to the building. So it was a very cluttered kind of cramped space there. And then in the middle of this space that wasn't for the public, there were desks and people sat at their desk, and sometimes they would get up and see the person, or sometimes they would just talk to the person from their desk, or sometimes someone another employee would be in front of this and they'd all kind of be handling. So it was often a very lively and loud space, just because there were a lot of people doing a lot of different transactions.
Was the what was the floor? Was it wood? Was it carpet? Do you remember?
I think on the employee side, I think there was this kind of very thin carpet surface. I think on the other side, if I'm remembering right, it was similar. I think it was like a continuation of the tile that was in the rotunda,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like
a
little,
penny?
the little penny tile. I think it was something like that.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it was different. It was not. It was different on the public side than it was on the employee side. There was a lot of traffic, there were chairs, so I think it wasn't practical to have, business things sitting on top of tile and that type of thing.
Okay. So there were sort of two sides. This was the public side,
Mm-hmm.
and then your office was on the other side. What was going on the other side?
So the other side, I actually, if I wanted to go out to the work area, so to speak, or where people were served, I had to get up from my desk, go through Carlton's office, and then out, because like his office had a doorway, as I'm recalling, out into the space. But I don't think mine did. I think they were just the way they were positioned. I had to go into his and out into the other one to get into, like, if there was a dispute or something I need to resolve, I would get up and go kind of through his office out to the other one. Yeah.
Okay. So how long were you working in City Hall?
I was in City Hall between 2 and 3 years, because then I was part of the project to move from City Hall to the Broughton building, the Broughton Municipal Building, I think, as we ended up calling it. So I was part of that project. So we moved from City Hall over to there. And a big part of it was to get some of the public-facing departments like revenue off Bay Street, out of City Hall, and just make it a little more customer friendly. So, us, the parking services was behind us in the basement of the Gamble building. I think IT moved, I think HR moved. So we tried to get many of those businesses that are departments that dealt with the public in some way away from the congestion and craziness of Bay Street and out of City Hall. So that's what we tried to do with that when they bought that. It was during the savings and loans crisis, and we bought the building from the city bought the building from a savings and loan.
Mm-hmm. And did you have a role in that move?
I did. I was actually the project manager, as I came to regret.
Why did you regret that?
Because no matter where you move someone, it was not, it was trying to keep 5 floors of people and make sure they felt like they had gotten a better space. They liked the space. Nobody, of course, wanted to be in the basement, but someone had to go in the basement. Certain people needed to be on the first floor or the second floor. So there was a lot of negotiation amongst departments, amongst department heads. I hadn't even been around that long. I didn't know very many people. So it was a little bit like, whoa. But I think in the end, it turned out to be a good move. I know that they're not there anymore. But it did open up, and I will say, especially for the revenue department, that's what I knew the most about. We were predominantly on the first floor. We had a lot more space. People had, they could come and sit with someone and talk about their concern, whether it was a business license or a property tax or a water bill or whatever it might be. So it was certainly a more professional environment than all the cubby holes, not just for the revenue department, but for other departments that moved. I mean, I think I'm pretty sure Chris Morrill was the budget director at the time. I think budget moved over because they were stuck over behind City Hall, but I'm not sure about that because they wanted to be close. I can't remember. But there were
Everybody got a lot more
space because if either you got space because you moved and got more space, or you got more space because somebody else moved and you could have their space. So the people in the Gamble building that were left ended up with more space because 4 other departments that had been crammed in there got moved over to Broughton Street. So I think in the end it was really good, and certainly, and I will speak for revenue, parking services, the ones I was most closely tied to. It was certainly more professional space. And open and windows and on Broughton Street. I think the staff enjoyed it. They could be on Broughton Street. They could go walk for lunch, things like that. So it was, I think overall it was an improvement. But yes, it was, everybody had, well, I want this window, and so there was a lot of that. But it was fun, and I think everybody in the end thought it was a good move.
Change is hard.
Yes.
Let me ask you, do you remember the safe that was in the revenue department?
I do, actually. It's funny that you should ask that. Yes, I believe I do. And I think mostly I remember because I don't know that I knew the combination or anything, but I think we actually used it. Like we put things in it either daily or weekly, and then we locked it up. Mm-hmm. Because we did have cash. We did have money, we had cash. This was, debit cards, all those things were way in the future at this time. So yeah, there was a lot of money in the office at any given time. Every window, it was like a cash register. Every window, it was exchanging money with people. So yeah, we actually used the safe every day because we had a lot of money coming and going on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything special about it?
Not that I recall, other than it seemed really old at that time and probably older now. And it was really big.
Yeah, it was really old. It's like from the 1860s.
Is it really? Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was. I didn't really have. It was like, yeah, this seems from another world.
Yeah, it's painted, and they used it until 2012.
Oh, really?
When they gave it to the archives. We're about to bring it back into City Hall as an artifact.
Oh, really? Where is it now?
It's in archival storage.
Oh, okay.
But when they moved it, it got moved. You guys moved it to B&B.
Yeah.
And then they replaced it in 2012 because the locking mechanism stopped working. That's the only reason they stopped using it.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I want to ask you just a little bit about some of the people you worked with and sort of their personalities and stuff. So let's start with Carlton West. Tell me about Carlton West.
Carlton West was a really nice guy. We could not have been more different. But yet we got along, and like I said, I had met him when I was in grad school and done a project and worked with him, and never, I really didn't think about. And then he reached out when the opportunity came up, and I applied and was able to get the job. I was working for the city of San Antonio, Texas at the time. He was very kind. He and his wife, the first New Year's Eve that my wife and I were here, of course we didn't really know anybody, and we were new to town. We were living in an apartment in Ardsley Park. They invited us to their house for dinner and Hoppin' John, which apparently is a tradition, which we didn't know at the time, but we do know now. And they were just really nice people. I think he had 2 adult kids by the time I think that were gone. But he was just a really nice guy, a very nice person to work for. He was very supportive of me in my career as I moved to other places in the city, and was just a nice guy to work for.
Was he the revenue director the entire time you were with the city?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
And then Michael Brown was assistant city manager the entire time you were with the city? He
was, and then he came back as the city manager just before I left the city, or but during the time, towards the time I was getting ready to leave the city employment, not Savannah, but the city employment, he came back. So he was not here. I'm going to think about this for a minute. He was not here. I'm getting confused. He might have left in between and then came back as the city manager when I came back. I think in the interim he had gone to Virginia or someplace.
Maybe Columbus.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and then came back because Don Donza was the city manager when I was at the city.
Okay.
And then the right near the end, Michael became the city manager.
Well, let's talk about Michael. Son.
Same thing. Michael, I worked for him when I was in grad school. He was a lot of fun. He was always very busy. He had challenges being on time to things, which my understanding is did not change over the course of his career. But he was a really nice guy. He clearly wanted what was best for the city, and he brought, not to be modest, but I think he was trying to bring good people to the city. I know he, like I said, I worked with Chris Morrill. My first day as an intern was Chris's first day as a management analyst for Michael. So he was starting his job, a job permanently with the city, and I was starting an internship. And then Chris was here when I came back, and we still exchanged Christmas cards. So I think that Michael, he was about being a professional city manager and bringing his expertise to discussions with council, which I have had the only, it can be frustrating because you are a professional feeling like you are the subject matter expert and you're trying to convey information to folks who may or may not be subject matter experts, and you're trying to convince them what to do and things like that. But yeah, I enjoyed working with Michael. He was very straightforward. He was always very supportive. I've talked to him a couple times since I've been back in Savannah, and since he's been retired and everything.
And what about Don Mendoza?
Don Mendoza was someone who I actually liked. He was not an easy person to interact with. He was very stern at times, but I found him to be very accepting if you kind of stood up for yourself. It was funny, once I had left the city, which he wrote me a snarky note about very much in jest, but because I left the city to go work for a nonprofit, but we occasionally would be in the same room because I was involved as a member of the Youth Futures Authority, as an agency with serving children and things like that. And I remember two things with Don. One, this was after I left the city and I was working for a different agency, and it was a time when they were hiring a new director at the Youth Futures Authority. Otis had decided to step down and do something else, go back to Savannah State, I think. And there was a discussion in the large room where all the members were participating about whether staff should be involved in an interviewing process for a new director. I was an advocate for staff being involved. Don was an advocate for staff not being involved. And this went around a little bit, different people said different things. I said something. Finally, Don said, well, John, was staff involved when you were hired in the job you're in now? And he said, and I said, well, yes, actually they were. He said, well, see, there's my point. So, and then he laughed, which was very nice. So, but I really liked Don. He was, a very stern person, I think, when you talk to him, but I liked him. We got along okay. And, he was always willing to talk to somebody. He was a hard person to get to sometimes. One time when I was with the city, we had a very challenging employee situation that I was involved with as a supervisor. And we were meeting with Don and an employee who was very unpredictable. To the point that we had an undercover police officer sit in on the meeting, and when asked who this person was, he goes, "Oh, that's my assistant. He's just going to sit here and take notes, whatever." And he, we had the meeting. He was very pleasant with the employee. We worked it out, everything, all that. But even in those kinds of situations, he was the city manager, and I was a little bit like, why does he even have to deal with this? But he handled it, and he was very supportive about, okay, these things come up. We'll handle them the way we should, and then we'll move on to the next thing.
So, what other positions did you hold with the city?
I was the assistant revenue director. I was the director of the Civic Center for a couple of years, and then I was the director of vehicle maintenance. Both times, both at the Civic Center at vehicle maintenance, there had been a transition under duress, shall we say, and I was asked to go in and, where there was an opportunity created and a chance, and in the Civic Center, I'd gotten to know Joe Shearhouse a little bit. He was really a nice guy, and he got to, I have kept in touch with him over the years. We have coffee every now and then. I always tell people that he's one of the nicest bosses, one of the best bosses, always gave me good advice that I'd ever had. And then a similar thing with vehicle maintenance. And then I went from there to I went to the nonprofit world after that.
Oh, I did not know you were this fixer all around this
Well,
city.
I wouldn't go that far. I just, a couple times where things, they needed somebody who kind of could just come in and, kind of calm things down. And I was able to do that.
When you were with vehicle maintenance, who were you working under with vehicle maintenance?
That would have been Bob Bartolotta.
Okay.
He was the assistant manager over, I don't know, it was management services, I think it was called, or he was over that bureau or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know if we were calling them bureaus at the time.
They were bureaus.
Yeah, and then Bob and Henry Moore was the other assistant city manager. Yeah.
Yeah, the Municipal Research Library was under Bob Bartolotta.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was. Yeah, like essentially almost all of City Hall was under, and then vehicle maintenance and a few other things.
So when did you leave the city to go to the nonprofit world?
I left the city in late '95, I think, somewhere in there. I was at the city maybe just a little bit short of exactly 5 years, I think, something like that.
And did you go straight to Youth Features Authority?
No, I became the executive director of Parent and Child. It was a child and family serving agency here in Savannah.
Okay. All right, so tell me a little bit about your progression through that world.
I was serving on a board. A fellow board member said, "Hey, I know about this opportunity," because he was on their board. He was on a lot of boards, and I ended up applying for the position. I was in my mid-30s. I was still trying to build my experiences. Thought, I had an interest in the nonprofit world. Enjoyed working with agencies that had something other than profit for their mission. And so I applied for it, and I got the position. I was at Parent and Child for 4 or 5 years. Went from there to the Telfair, and then from there to Union Mission.
When were you at Youth Features?
I was never employee Youth Features. I was just, because the agencies I work for, I think we were called members or something.
Okay.
So I was involved with them, just because of where I worked.
What did you do at Telfair?
I was the deputy director, and basically there during the time of the permitting for the Jepson Center.
Oh.
But found that at the time, given that we're meeting in a cultural institute at the moment, that I had the opportunity came up to go over to Union Mission, and the human service world was more engaging with me at that time. So I was only there like 18 months, something like that.
So when and why did you leave Savannah?
My wife's got a professional opportunity in the Northeast, and wanting to be a supportive husband, I said, of course, I will go with you. We will figure this out. And we moved to Western Massachusetts, and we're in Massachusetts for almost 20 years.
Wow. But you came back to Savannah.
We did. Both my wife and I had job transitions, career transitions during COVID. An opportunity came up in Savannah, and we knew people here. It was such a time of upheaval, so to speak. And we thought that at least we would know some people. We'd have a place to start. We still had friends here. So we decided that, if we were going to have to go someplace, might as well go someplace where we know some folks and we know the community a little bit.
Yeah. So being gone for 20 years and then coming back, how has Savannah changed since you were here before?
That's interesting. I would say I would describe it as the things that are the same are very much the same, and the things that are different are really different. So it's kind of like, wow, like these things have all happened. It's not like, we drove into town and we didn't know where to get to our address where we were renting a place. Those kinds of things. But clearly, in a lot of ways, the city is much more diverse. Where people are from, their backgrounds, their ethnicities, all those kinds of things have just, we're really just starting in many ways. When we were here and when we were leaving, I remember people kind of talking about the Starland Dairy, and now that's a whole area of town that's, a lot of fun. There are a lot more people here, which I'm sure is both a blessing and a curse. I can remember when we were here before, and one of the attractions, especially of working downtown, there were times when there were lots of tourists here, and there were times when there were not as many tourists here, or there were almost no tourists here. And now it just seems like it's either busy or it's really busy, and kind of those are the two modes. There's no kind of downtime around tourism and just being downtown. The array of restaurants and cultural activities and all those things has been greatly enhanced. You know, we moved here a couple of years ago, actually the weekend that End Market Arena opened. That was like mid-February, and that was something that had been talked about for when I was here before. I mean, that we need a new arena, and we need, especially when I was at the Civic Center. So yeah, I think there's lots of things that have just continued to grow, and Savannah's become a very popular place. And then there's things that still need to be worked on, as with any community. But I think just the number of people, the diversity of people, where they're from, what experiences they're bringing as kind of a cultural and a community, I think is probably one of the biggest things. I'm sure that SCAD has, can be identified as a big factor in that, but I think it's probably rippled out as well.
I meant to ask you one other thing about the revenue department
Sure.
in City Hall. If you had ever heard about, I'd heard this from one person, I've had trouble confirming it, that during period of segregation that the Black community had to come up to the window on the side of the City Hall, that's where the Hyatt is now, and pay their bills through the window rather than coming into City Hall to pay.
I can honestly say I'd never heard that. That's not, it was not a period of time when I was here, or not here,
Yeah, I'm just
So.
trying to see if I can confirm that.
Yeah.
Those were my questions. But I'm curious if there's anything else you'd like to share about the city organization, or about Savannah, or even about Ships of the Sea Museum where you work now.
Yeah. I will say that my time with the city was very enjoyable. I met a lot of great people, many of which, now many years later, I still keep in touch with. And some of them are still here, and some of them moved on, some of them have gone to other places. There was a really nice group of people. It was very Savannah. We enjoyed. Both our children were born here. So I think we were very fortunate to be here at a time. We were here, quote unquote, just before the book, and we lived in we were. Houses in Ardsley Park were still pretty affordable, and even as a young couple when we moved here, I had a job, my wife didn't, and we figured it out, and we were able to buy a place and all those kinds of things. So it's a little different now, certainly. I think it's certainly for young people, but it's still, it's an incredibly beautiful city. It's one that we have found people to be friends with over decades of our lives, that are involved in our lives, involved in our children's lives. And my time with the city was when that started, and so I will always think about it very fondly. Again, both with time when our children were born, and when the kindnesses that people exchanged with us or gave to us during the time when our children were little. So it's a beautiful city, and it was a great place to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.